Book your first cleaning today for only $19. I felt like I hated my apartment, but it turned out
Good morning. A bit of echo. Good morning. Sorry, I was on the wrong channel. Okay, are we okay now? Is it fine? Good morning to each and every one of you. My name is Andrea Pochak, and I'm the rapporteur from Mexico, the country record. I'm joined by Commissioner Gloria de Mes, yes, and Assistant Executive Secretary Maria Claudia Pulido, the Special Rapporteur for the Economics, Social and Cultural Rights, Mr. Palumo, and on the end, our specialist in Mexico and other things, Ms. Melcy, and we are very much looking forward to get this hearing. This is about women who are seeking those murdered in Mexico. Before we begin, I'd like to explain the dynamics of the hearing a bit, how it's going to work. As far as the timing, 20 minutes for the civil society, then 20 minutes for the state to give their opening. I understand that the state has in-person participants as well as virtual participants. And then we will hear from a UN official, from the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights from the Mexico office, who will have 7 minutes to speak. And then the Inter-American Commission will have its turn to ask questions or make comments for 20 minutes. I believe there's problems with the microphone right now. There's feedback. And following the remarks of the Inter-American Commission, the civil society will have another 10 minutes, and the state will have 10 minutes as well to close out, wrap up the hearing, which will last a total of an hour and a half. Before I begin, I would like to let you all know that this hearing is taking place in the context of the 65th anniversary of the ICHR. And it's important to remember our commitment over 65 years to the defense and promotion of human rights, thanks to the common interest and consensus of the states and societies to give life to the American Convention and the Democratic Charter. Since 1959, hundreds of professionals have come through this institution, and thousands of individuals, groups, and peoples have resorted to the Commission requesting in search of protection, justice, and reparation. We're celebrating 65 minutes of history with more than 100 country visits and reports, and 1,000 precautionary measures granted, more than 750 marriage reports, 220 friendly settlement agreements, and 377 cases referred to the court. All of this with the victims at the center of our efforts and with the highest priority attached to them. With regard to accessibility, to make sure that this hearing is accessible, there's some feedback right now. There's noise.
Para asegurarnos que
make sure that this hearing is inclusive, we request every participant to begin their presentation with their name, their position in the organization or institution that they're representing, and every time that anyone takes the floor, please say your name at first so that persons with visual disability are able to identify who's taking the floor. Likewise, we remind you that these hearings have closed captioning on Zoom. Anyone can activate them directly from their equipment and choose the size that they'd like to view the image. Also, this is available to people who are viewing us through the ICHR channels. And so these are women seekers in Sinaloa, Zacatecas, and other states particularly where there's been murdered sons and daughters, and these are women, and there have been retaliation against them and other ongoing plight that they face. And so the representatives of the victims have the floor. Good morning. My name is Raimundo Sandoval. I'm a member of the Platform for Peace and Justice of Guanajuato in Mexico. We're grateful for holding this hearing. Here we're representatives of EPLF, Article 19, Centro Pro, and joining us are members of groups of families of disappeared persons from Aguas Calientes, Sinaloa, Guanajuato. There's a broad group of petitioners. In this hearing, Alejandro Martinez of Sinaloa, to my right, Javier Barajas. Both are from Guanajuato, and lastly, Maria de Becky from Article 19. We'd like to point out that the families had made a gargantuan effort for the Commission to convene an in-person hearing on this topic, and we hope that the state that's taking part virtually as well has representation at a high enough institutional level as warranted by this issue. The reason we're here to address one of the most painful issues, the high rates of disappearances here, not only affect the families of the disappeared, but also there is a lack of response and collusion with groups, criminal groups in these acts, which have forced the families to take over, searching for their family members by their own means, even with everything in their own hands. These groups that investigate this as a group have raised the profile of their efforts, and they've learned together to be able to find their loved ones. They're called different ways. They're called sleuths and seekers and so many different things. But what they're trying to do, they look in mass graves under the floor, breaking concrete floors in cemeteries and rivers everywhere, in tunnels and irrigation systems and farms and sewage systems. They're always looking, and the state knows where they are and doesn't seek. And so this is widespread in Mexico. There's so many different reasons for the disappearance: economic, political reasons often. The disappearances are committed by private people, even with the support and acquiescence of and authorization of states agents. In Mexico, states agents also make people disappear, and any person can be a victim of disappearance. This phenomenon of disappearance is we have to identify and seek and identify these people. At this hearing, what we propose is that we're seeking protection for the people who are seeking their family members who have disappeared. This protection under the framework of international obligations. The Mexican government has undertaken these obligations to look for human rights, the family members and human rights advocates. In view of the murders and threats and forced displacements, this is all tied to these searches. And so this has been discussed on many occasions by the state of Mexico. At this hearing, what we want to point out is since 2010, there's more than 20 people who have been seeking. These people have been murdered. Only 15 in the period of López Obrador, as we can see here in these images. All of these cases remain unresolved. These risks cannot be disassociated from the disappearance crisis in Mexico and the lack of a state response. So we need a census. We have to look at the National Registry of Disappeared Persons, which seem to try to just minimize the scope of the crisis. And they just say the 6,000 some odd complaints of the almost 115,000 people recognized on the registry. The state presents this as a searching strategy. They just reduce the number of disappeared persons. And also, we need the dismantling of the efforts to make a federal effort to search for these people, and the forensic efforts. These are efforts that the Commission at one point in time had been recognized by him. And there's laws and institutions in Mexico, but however, they're ineffective and they do nothing because there's no coordination. in assistance at the institutional level. There is a crisis for seeking for these people. These regressive policies, in addition to the high-level messages of sort of undermining the complaints, all they do is perpetuate the risks and unleash and set in motion and further risks and make it harder for the women who are looking for their children. And so the purpose of this, two people since we called for this, Angelita Esmeralda of Baja California, Noé Sandoval of Guerrero, have been murdered since we asked for this, and they continue to be Lorenzo Cano continues to be missing. These are human rights seekers. These human rights defenders, these people who are seeking their children. Alejandra Martinez of Sinaloa now has the floor. Good morning. My name is Alejandra Martinez. I'm and the brother of a disappeared gentleman since 12th of July of 2020, and I'm a member of the group for Justice in Sinaloa. And there's many risks in the impact. To speak about this, it's so hard because we normalize the violent situation we're experiencing. I want to focus on Rosario, our colleague was looking for in La Cruz, Sinaloa since 2009, her daughter, and she was murdered because she was looking for her in 2022. Rosario organized a group of victims. And at 9 p.m., and organized crime members walked off with her, and she was found at 2 a.m. Her body was wrapped with a photo of her son on it. The prosecutor of Sinaloa was aware of all of this and told us that there were people who were being held in custody for the crime. And then it was corroborated that later we were told there was nobody who had been taken into custody for this crime. There were many threats. Months later, and her house was burned while she was inside. It was burned. And after that, the same people from organized crime who she identified, they stole her truck. She did not file a complaint about this, but the Human Rights Subsecretariat was notified about this, and family members. She did not file a complaint because she knew that the prosecutor's office itself may be involved. And a month before she was murdered, there was a patrol car from the police with members of the municipal police and a person who was wearing civilian clothes. And they made signal to Rosario, and they said, "What the fuck do you want?" and warned her to stop searching. And Rosario, organized crime, called her on the phone. She never figured out how they got her number, but they kept repeating it. They wanted to know. She just said, "I want to know where my son is," and she begged them to say where he was, and she begged and prayed at night because she worked in Chile harvest. She would work, and only at night she would look, and she would find places where possibly there were bodies. Sometimes she couldn't wait. And she alone would try to dig up. She would bring photos, and these were human remains she would find. And one time we looked in La Cruz, Sinaloa, and the security people who left us alone because there was a confrontation. And every time we search, there's always, they call them falcons, and they're people on motorcycles who are members of organized crime, and they're supposed to be trailing us and surveilling us to not let us search. And on 2 occasions, the security men who have stopped these people to interrogate them, and usually they just ignore them as if they're not there. As a group, we know a place where there's remains of bodies, and we call for a search. We just want if we want the state police to come, it would take 3 days. So we want greater security, like federal security. We have to wait 5 days for federal security agents to come. And so what could happen? They'll take the remains or the bodies before we can get there. And we have to call 911 always, and we usually have to wait more than an hour, usually 2 hours, so that the expert witnesses or security comes. In the meantime, we as a group, we have to guard the remains that we find. It's another of the risky situations that happens to many of us often, and particularly to me. is that we were extorted by members of the prosecutor's office who used the data that we used to make the complaint to say that they had my brother and were, in addition to this, they were re-victimized by the office of the prosecutor. And I'm talking about situations in Sinaloa. But what I'm telling you about our group and the murder of this person is something that we, the women seekers throughout the country, experience. They trail us, they threaten us, and they re-victimize us, but we continue to search for our kids. And now Javier has the floor. Good morning, members of the Commission. I'm Javier Barrajas Barrera of the Ángeles de Piepote of the state of Guanajuato, the father of Maria Guadalupe, who disappeared in 2020 in February. A year later, together with our son, Francisco, we found Lupita in a clandestine grave in the state of Guanajuato, together with 80 other bodies. And then she found her sister, and in looking for other disappeared people, our son, Francisco Javier, was murdered on 29th of May of 2021, 3 months later, after she found the remains of his sister. My wife and I, we had to be displaced. We had to leave our home, our house, our family, and all our friends, from lifetime friends. We risked our lives because we were looking for a disappeared person. The most painful thing of being displaced is that we cannot go and search for people together with the members of the group that we belong to. Not only our own children, but the possibility to be able to look for everybody who's missing. As seekers, we look for signs of life, and we do this. This has a physical and emotional impact on us to a degree that we feel that we're only surviving, and even so, we have the hope for justice, not only with regard to what happened to our children, but all the disappearing people from our state. Guanajuato was not always like this. It was a tranquil state before we could go out fishing and go out and have picnics in the mountains and everywhere with our families. But now, these areas are word used by the criminal groups as mass graves, clandestine mass graves, and there's impunity abounds. It prevails, and there's authorization for them to continue to committing these crimes. Who can we trust in if the authorities that should be protecting us are colluding with the criminal groups? They couldn't do what they do and control so much territory if the authorities didn't allow them or support them. We are witnesses of this impunity. We've experienced it ourselves. The judiciary of Guanajuato has acquitted twice those responsible for the murder of our son Javier, despite the fact that there's been eyewitnesses who saw and telephone evidence, and the defendants, if they found the weapon that they killed my son with, and that same weapon has been used, and 15 other murders. The prosecuting attorney hasn't investigated, and we cannot achieve justice this way. Next week, the trial of those who made Lupita disappear. What can we expect from this? So many families don't dare denounce this, decry this, because we're helpless. The witnesses have disappeared, and the investigations don't move forward. If we wouldn't be pressuring, the authorities themselves are afraid. Many people in the country face the same thing. Lorenza Cano, who's a seeker from Salamanca, and her son and her husband were murdered, and 2 people were released immediately, but as of today, we don't know the whereabouts of them. There's no justice. There's no authority in Guanajuato. It's a lawless state, Guanajuato, as so many other parts of the country are. They're in the hands of the criminal groups. And the follow-up that can be done by the Commission with regard to this can lead to a rupture of this impunity, this cycle of impunity. And also, this is very important for the seekers in general throughout the country. Justice for us is the suffering that we experience should not be, nobody should be subjected to it. We have to put an end to this impunity once and for all, and there must be justice. May there be light and hope, not only for our families, but also so that nobody else has to face what me and my wife had to confront. And as my son, Francisco Javier, said, onward, because we're not going to leave anybody behind until there's justice and that we know the truth. Good morning. I'm Viviana Mendoza. I'm looking for my brother, Ojeda Negrete, who disappeared on January 8th, 2018. It's been a long road to search for my brother, and we, the searchers, women searchers, we've been denied protection on many occasions. The state assures that our lives are at risk as victims, but they don't take into account that we're searching, and they don't tie the two together, and that they say we run the risk because we're women. We're at risk. We're in peril because they are using a differentiated approach to us. And so in Mexico, the mechanisms of protection are inefficient, and they cannot cope with all the protection that everybody needs. When we seek this protection, we have to explain the acts of aggression that we've suffered. But how are we going to prove this aggression when the perpetrators have been the authorities themselves? We have called on the Commission in the Mexican state to be considered as to consider us as human rights defenders. However, they've denied this, and that makes us more in danger. And my colleagues who are here and throughout the whole country, they strip us of our precautionary measures, and our protection plans are no longer implemented. Our groups, just as like other ones in the country, we've created search brigades that are independent, and we work in the fields. And we found a lot of clandestine mass graves. In other words, we do the work that should be done by the Mexican state. And furthermore, when we conduct searches, it's in territories that are under the control of criminal groups that operate with the authorization and support of state's agents, even living at the risk of being murdered. The response of the institutions should ensure our protection and provide care workshops, and they just simply say, oh no, it's your responsibility to protect yourselves. And more than 20 murdered colleagues of mine because they were told, protect yourself. That's what the Mexican state is, and there should be early warning mechanisms should be in place under the federal law of protection.
Ser un buen avance.
I believe that this is a good step forward, but if it's not effective and we're still at risk, what good does it do? We have to deal with these criminal groups who have our communities under their thumbs, and our communities in the militarization of security in Mexico is a factor that's the consequence of which has been an increase in the number of forced disappearances. When we speak of protection, women seekers, we understand it as access to all necessary guarantees to look for our disappeared family members without imperiling our own existence. We demand and we beg of the state, which is not doing anything about it. On the contrary, it's just looking at the figures, the numbers of disappeared people without understanding that the situation in each country is different in each state. We demand protection, and thereby we're calling on dismantling this criminal rings and the extortion rings, drug trafficking rings, and weapons trafficking rings as well. So there's no longer any more disappeared individuals, and also to locate our brothers, our sisters, our mothers, our fathers, and other family members who today are missing in thousands of families in Mexico. Marty has the floor now. Good morning. I'd like to ask for 2 more minutes to be able to, if the prayer for relief. If we do so, 22 minutes for you all, but 22 minutes the state will have as well, in fairness. Fine. So thank you very much. I'm Maria De Vecchio, of Truth and Memory Officer of Article 19 for Office of Mexico and Central America. Because of everything we've just explained here at this hearing, based on this, we'd like to respectfully call on the Commission to, one, to urge the Mexican state to recognize these women seekers as human rights defenders, and that their risks are associated with their activities of looking for disappeared persons. Two, to call on the Mexican state to put into place a protection mechanism for these seekers and journalists, and look for how many people, and come up with a number of how many have asked for protection, have been granted and rejected, including specific measures that have been granted. Three, to call on the state so that this mechanism for protection, collective protection for independent seekers, and take into account the diversity of these groups. Four, to conduct a visit by the Plenary Commission to Mexico, focusing on these disappearances and particularly on protection of these women, seekers. Five, include the information that we presented here in the thematic report on disappearances in Mexico, which is being prepared by this commission. Six, the rapporteurship for human rights defenders and the unit in charge of precautionary measures in this commission to review the individual petitions and precautionary measures that have been filed for about the subject of this hearing, especially Francisco Javier Espinosa Almanza, Ismael Alejandro Martinez Carrozales, and Guadalupe Alejandra Aguilar Jauregui. 7. Request information from the state with regard to the response of the local commission and the national search commission, the petitions of the families to conduct searches in specific areas where the groups have pointed out. Also, the state should provide information about the steps it's taken to investigate the murders and disappearances of the seekers. And with this, we will send in the case files to us with a non-exhaustive list, and the cost of searching should not be one's life. Thank you very much, representatives of the petitioners. We give the floor now to the representative of the state, who have 22 minutes.
Muchas gracias. Muy buenos días, distinguidas comisionadas.
A very good morning to all of you, commissioners, rapporteurs for DESCA, members of the commission, and representatives of civil society who honor us with their presence or indeed connected by Zoom. We are very grateful to the commission for this particular hearing that enables us to consider the plight of those who have been lost and their family members who are searching for them in great hope that they will find them. And we present our deepest respect to the mothers and family members who are still searching. We greet our colleagues from the National Commission on Search, from the Secretary of State of Mexico and the Ministry of the Interior, and I'm going to give the floor to each of these in turn for the comments that the State of Mexico would like to offer.
Buen día, les saluda.
I'm Chavit Pliego Granillo, Director of Public Policy of the National Commission, the National Search Commission. I greet you all. The state of Mexico recognizes the right of families of those who have disappeared to look for them and to ascertain what has occurred. Various protection systems have been set up to assist them. The interpreter regrets there is great echo and I can hardly hear. Sorry, says the chair, I'm going to stop that at the moment. Apparently the speaker is not listening. She is still speaking. The interpreter regrets. Can you hear me? Nope, she's reading on. The interpreter points on. Well, we're just going to stop the clock because there is a considerable acoustic problem, and I hope that the technicians here in Washington are able to assist in some manner.
Hago una pequeña prueba.
Si me disculpan,
The speaker is going on and on. She thinks the problem is in Mexico.
Y está un poco mejor, ¿verdad?
¿Me escuchan bien?
Ahora sí.
Can you hear me? The interpreter regrets it's the same sound. We will do our best until such time as it's not possible. The speaker wanted to say that we support, uphold, and commiserate with the families that are absolutely decided not to give up and keep looking for their loved ones. This is a question of justice, and the search for the lost is a human right. We understand that as the state, we owe the population in general the means by which they can be defended and assisted where necessary. Article 127 of the National Procedural Code, the Criminal Procedural Code, states as much. Once an accusation is made and brought to the attention of the attorneys of the various independent states of the Republic of Mexico and to the national authorities themselves, the victims, as well as their family members, are noted. What we seek is to avoid irreparable damage to more people and to ensure the safety of those who are looking. The general law on the question of forced disappearance of persons that has been occasioned by private individuals and the national system for search states in Article 123 establishes the obligation of the state judiciary to set up protection for the family of the victims and any other individual who is involved in the search for people who have been lost, who are missing, and who have yet to be found. The concern is that these searchers may themselves be subject to intimidation and indeed disappearance. And so we look for the protection of individuals who are seeking to make the difference. And we look for the assistance of our entire federation, the central state and the governments of the individual states. Our program, in order to keep looking for the disappeared, does set forth means of different kinds of searches that are complementary. Immediate search, the search for patterns, the search for family members, inter alia. Now, these are various separate methods, but they all tend to assist in finding where the lost may be found. And many of these measures, it is urged, should be used simultaneously. There is a presupposition that the search mechanisms need to be complementary. This can be in a forensic context. It can involve searching for a family member or a more general search. There are different types of searches. And the protocol to which I refer does state that those who are looking for the disappeared have the absolute right to be part of the search party. They can't be turfed out or blocked. They have a means by which they can assist, can be involved, including during the search itself. Here we recognize, of course, the recognition that these individuals have, in terms of already having learned a lot about looking, about what needs to be done, about what might work, and how they might assist the search entities themselves. But it is established, certainly, that it is a responsibility of the state itself to be involved and to keep at it. The public authorities, just because family members are involved in the third, are by no means off the hook. They have got to keep looking. They have a role to play and a duty to fulfill. Equally, a duty to carry on with investigations, with the ongoing forensic specialized work that these events demand. There is also the question of security. Security must be afforded those who are going on in the search so that they can continue in their activity, whether it's the search or in their own livelihoods, without being threatened. The law states that the authorities of the state must be supportive, and searches in the field should be conducted with the support of the Secretariat or the Ministry for Citizen Security. This will also serve as a bridge among different institutions so that the National Search Commission has an overall sense of what entities are involved and at what level. Civilian society and different groups that have been put together to search for loved ones are entitled to support. There are, for instance, studies to search the territory in which persons might have gone missing. There are drones that are used. There are overhead flights that are used, and a number of other measures. All of this because the central state, the authorities, understand the tremendous burden of families feeling that they're really on their own and the state could care less. If ever that was true, that is not true now. Just recently, we set up a national search committee for people gone missing in 2024. This is not activity that falls under any one branch or under one state authority. This is national. And there is a national secretariat on public security. The Justice Department of the Republic itself, the National Citizens Council, and the National Commission on the Search for Justice, inter alia. There are various representatives of family members and of civilian groups that have also spoken up, and we seek to strengthen the search operations so that the 127 persons who are looking for their people and who are at it all over the country are recognized and supported at the different national centers in order to assist them through the local representation. We will also hold 32 different cooperation meetings, coordination meetings throughout the Federation, that is, throughout the Republic, so that 5 regional meetings may also take place. Thank you very much. I am Norma Herrera, and I am here to speak on the defense of human rights from the Ministry of the Interior. We are in touch with the various associations that work in justice and in search. There are protective mechanisms for the people who are searching at all levels, down to the local level, and even when there has to be a special group set up. At the federal level, that is countrywide, we do have a committee on human rights defenders and a group of press specialists who also collaborate with us and with the Ministry of the Interior. What we seek to do is to identify what measures can be set up by means of protection when that is necessary. even if it's immediate. We wish to protect life, protect liberty, protect life and limb, I might add. Anyone who joins this mechanism is automatically covered by our protection, and the risk analysis that serves as a protection plan is approved at the highest level. We seek to minimize risk through the best measures possible to be of assistance, both locally and collectively. But these measures taken federally shall never attempt to supplant or curb or otherwise limit the individual search of family members, because we here seek to respect human rights and legality. Our group is the highest level group in government to try to evaluate, to suspend, or if needed, to modify the protection measures that are accorded the people involved. We are joined by a representative of the Ministry of the Interior, one from the Ministry for Citizen Protection, one from Foreign Affairs, one from Human Rights, and others who are representatives of the Elective Council, that is a group that has been set up by people directly involved in these happenings. And there's an overall person who manages the entire association. As to strengthening, this mechanism has tightened up its means of interaction. We work with the National Commission of Human Rights and the office found in Mexico City, the capital that represents the United Nations, and the high authority that deals with civilian affairs. We're talking about protection, prevention, institutional strength, capacity building, and at all levels. In October of 2022, a working group was set up precisely to strengthen protective measures. This was set forth by the means that I have already mentioned, by the High Commission for the United Nations in Mexico and representatives of the civil society groups that are specialized here. We're talking about protection for human rights defenders as well as newspaper people, journalists of all kinds who are very much involved in making sure that people know what's happening. In the previous government, 180 million pesos had been earmarked for protective measures. But in the present government, 213 million pesos have been earmarked in order that the support for the lookers, for the searchers, can be better buttressed as needed. In November of 2022, we strengthened the capacity, the actual ability to intervene. We went from 42 to 72 people working in the public sphere. This means that there has been a 70% increase in staff allocated to this mechanism. In 2024, in the present year, we intend to give continuity to the present working group and therefore to respect the commitment of the present government of Mexico to protect and defend the defenders of human rights and journalists. And within a couple of hours, as a matter of fact, over the course of today, there will be a meeting of this commission at which these issues will be considered. We also have a roundtable for peace with the various different state governments and representatives of the country at large. The government of Mexico also has national security measures that fights violence, that builds peace, and seeks to offer guarantees for women to live violence-free. These roundtables for peace, as they are called, mesas de paz in Spanish, are part of the national strategy for peace and peace building in 2024. Those roundtables meet daily, ladies and gentlemen, in every state of the Republic. To what end? To take stock of where public security stands at that very moment in that particular place, particularly to fight for peace where peace is missing. There are 276,000 local and several at the federal level that work in this manner. Local authorities are the ones entrusted with security and justice in each one of our states. But at the federal level, the Security Cabinet meets with the specific aim of keeping in touch with the various different state level and regional level tables, with a view to making sure that communication channels are always open at the three levels of government in order to define operations where they need to be launched and to seek visibility so that everybody knows that there is a direct effort to build peace and protection in the countries. These peace roundtables, mesas de paz, have been operating since 2023. 238,000 meetings have been held. And there is a commitment on the part of the federal government of Mexico to ensure that this continues, to build peace. These roundtables seek particularly to be buttressed by the National Guard and various different federative state-level also authorities, as well as to focus on areas of public administration as well as the private sector that need to do better to assist the population in protecting themselves from illicit activity. As regards gender, the present government of Mexico has paid a very great deal of attention to preventing attacks on women, crime against women, gender-based activity that has so long gone with impunity. There are networks for peace, and we consider that this a fairly novel strategy, which was grassroots, by the way, didn't come from the top down, that is given pretty good results. The public authorities, as well as the National Institute for Women, are involved through the line for public security and additional support for various women's groups. This entire strategy seeks to involve women at all levels so that through this plan of action there can be a stronger and more vibrant participation of the citizenry, as well as in the ability of citizens to strengthen the social fabric across the board. Through our national protocol to strengthen police support fighting crimes against women, we have since September of 2022 a platform which allows for smoother implementation of measures to assist women who have been harassed, who have been hurt, or indeed to prosecute cases of murder against women. The 25th of March of last year, or since the 25th of March of last year, there has now been a cabinet position focused on gender. Gender is now a permanent focus, a cross-cutting element that is considered in all levels of protection and security at large. At the federal level, at the state level, at the city, municipal level. With the actions in question, the hope is that both in terms of training and additional professionalization of these different agencies, we can do better. That is the whole point. We want women who have been victims of violence to be assisted, and others who haven't yet been victims to make sure that they don't become victims. We certainly will continue assisting in the search for people who are missing, the women who are looking, and people in general, as well as females in general. We understand that there are some specific measures that still need to be taken. This is a very tough and complex issue, and we have listened carefully to those who have already spoken. I thank you.
Bueno.
Now, it's time to give the floor to the representative of the High Commissioner, UN High Commissioner, Jesus Peña has the floor. Who's in charge in Mexico of the UN Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights in Mexico. You have 7 minutes. Thank you very much for this, allowing me to speak at this hearing at the 189th session, to speak at this hearing about women seekers as the representative in Mexico of the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights. I'm sorry, the sound has been lost.
Se fue el sonido.
We've lost the sound. Let's stop the time, and we'll work it out. Now we can hear you. Continue. Thank you very much. I'm grateful to the Commission for convening this hearing, and of course you receive our support and the 65th anniversary also of your creation and convening this hearing. The searching for missing persons in Mexico is just a heart-wrenching issue in Mexico and throughout the country and other places. And on top of losing their loved ones, there's fear and distrust towards these families that are searching for the families, particularly the mothers, have played an essential role in the search for their loved ones, not only as victims, but also as leaders of groups and human rights defenders. These ladies have an unwavering commitment to searching for their sons and daughters, accountability, justice, and calling into question the actions of the government. Their hearts implore the authorities to search for their own loved ones, but that for no one else to have to experience this. In 2006, there was a militarization of security, and this has continued, and that these women seekers are the ones who have kept the flame alive of finding their loved ones and to improving policies and the regulatory framework and the institutions engaged in this. There's so many different challenges. Insecurity is one of the major challenges they face. Violence against these women seekers in Mexico has ratcheted up since 2019 to date. Our office has documented murder as a possible retaliation for searching for their loved ones, and more so among women. We've also seen accompanied many mothers who are searching mothers who have suffered other crimes because of their action, and these crimes remain in impunity. And a few months ago, we published a report that called on the prosecutors to follow recommendations to avoid to prevent impunity from happening in these cases. I want to underscore that this lack of protection has, in the last few months, have led to some women seekers they've fallen into despair in the face of these criminal rings that threaten them. The UN office in Mexico has called attention to the need to aid these women, and the Committee Against Forced Disappearance in November of 2015 has called on preventing and punishing any encouragement and help to these criminal rings and to help these women who are searching for their loved ones, and to adopt a prevention policy and eradication of these forced disappearances. The committee recognizes the role of the victims and to heed and meet their needs of protection. And measures have been taken by the Mexican state to protect human rights defenders, including the general law of disappeared persons and the federal law of protection and its mechanism. However, there's still many challenges to approve effective and comprehensive measures for this protection, including, firstly, all institutions that are involved in this have to be provided sufficient resources in that to stop making these women seekers responsible for the searches rather than the government should be responsible for it. Thirdly, we have noticed challenges for the family members of the disappeared persons to gain access to protection mechanisms in several different cases. The process of becoming members of these groups makes them imperils their lives and safety, and the consequences have been fatal at times. The mechanism should have special protocols of attention for these groups that are and consider the particular characteristics of the groups of women seekers, and then so the working group should work to strengthen these mechanisms and initiatives. Fourthly, the assistance and psychosocial support networks should be strengthened and provide health care and protection of their property. And so we must ensure respect for the human rights of these people, participation of the family members, and incorporation of a gender-based approach and an age-based approach in a differentiated way of older women. I would like to wrap up by underscoring that aside from being pillars and sources of and fonts of inspiration for everyone, these women's searchers have demanded specific actions and have been in the face of the disappearance of their loved ones. It's important to recognize their unwavering efforts and provide them protection and support to these women who are mothers, sisters, wives, friends of both those who are trying to find their own loved ones as well as those who seek justice. In all these searches, you have the support and technical assistance of the High Commissioner for Human Rights of the United Nations. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, representative of the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights. And now it's time for the remarks of the members of the Inter-American Commission of Human Rights, and I give the floor this time to my colleague, Commissioner de Mies.
Excuse me. Good morning to all participants to this session, representatives of the CEOs, the mothers, the sisters, all family members, the fathers, and also members of the state. I thank you for your interventions, and mostly, louder, okay. I thank you for your interventions. I listened to you carefully, and there are a few questions, at least one question. I think the remark was also made by the representative of the UN, which I say thank you, which I thank also for his intervention. Sitting here and only looking, I don't think I even had to hear you speak, looking at you, being here in this moment, there's one question that is very important to me, and that is, what measures would you require to be guaranteed for the care of your physical well-being as well as your mental health. What is it that you need? Because I think that the consequence of what you have experienced in terms of loss, but also the fact that you seek for your loved ones and you seek for justice. To bear that, I would want to know, first of all, what is it that you need in terms of your physical well-being as well as your mental well-being. And then I want to know as well if you can give me if you could give us an idea of your involvement in all of these working groups that have taken place. What has been your involvement in terms of the implementation of those groups, the design, and in terms of your participation? And then I want to request from the state if they could maybe shed some light, because I've heard the following. So maybe the following question, very concretely in terms of answers: whether women seekers are acknowledged as human rights defenders. That is what really needs to be clear, and I think it's a simple yes or no question answer. Has the state incorporated into these national protection mechanisms? Have they incorporated women seekers into these national protection mechanisms for the human rights work? That is one. And then related to that question is, were these CSOs, these women seekers, were they involved in the whole design of these national protection mechanisms? So I want to know, what is the involvement, what is the engagement, because it seems as if there is a really big disconnect. Thank you.
Okay. Obviously, in Mexico, as the state itself has recognized on numerous occasions, there is a humanitarian crisis of disappearances. This hearing reflects this, and in the 65 years of existence of this Inter-American Commission, we cannot help that we haven't been able to eliminate this scourge. This places us in a situation where we have to account for why. The state and international human rights protection mechanisms as well. Over the last years, the state has recognized this dire problem and has adopted institutional measures, taken institutional measures to address it. The different institutions have been created, different laws have been enacted with regard to disappearance, searches, protection mechanisms, victim assistance, federal commissions, local commissions, specialized prosecutors' offices. And nonetheless, lately, the Inter-American Commission and other international commissions have received information that evince serious backsliding in this regard, failure to implement the laws, lack of funding for the mechanisms, lack of coordination. And this has led to us drafting a report, as you've mentioned, about the disappearance of individuals in Mexico. And that's why we're doing so. A direct consequence of the failure to provide a sufficient response is the situation of these women seekers. There's not only women seekers, there's male seekers as well, we have to point it out. Brothers, fathers. The situation of these searchers. They have to, on their own, go out and search for their loved ones, and they suffer the consequences of this search. On top of everything all they've suffered, is outrageous. And other opportunities, the Inter-American Commission and the UN as well, there has been follow-up on the social, economic, and psychological impact that searching for missing persons has. Today, we're convened here because of the security, mostly. To go out and look for their missing lost ones, it imperils your own life. That's outrageous. And it's intolerable, not to say unacceptable. There have been recommendations that need to be heeded in this regard. I'm not going to focus on the questions with regard to the protection systems because there's a specific hearing on this later. But I'm going to focus on the searches themselves. We take note on the first meeting of the National Searching System. We hope that this meetings become regular over time and to ensure the participation of civil society, particularly the movement of women searchers, and that there's coordination at the federal level with the state level. What are the concrete mechanisms that exist at all the levels between the federal level and the state level for we have to be told for those who has gone out to search, who has provided a support, who has paid attention to these women. And it's intolerable that thus far we don't see this. If the local level is ineffective, the federal level has to step in. The state must support actively these searches. And once you find that miraculously they found the remains, their loved ones or the remains thereof, then there's a second disappearance, the remains of those who guard and those who can identify them. Then this is further compounded, and it's intolerable that the whole mechanism that's been created. What we expect is that this institutional framework of the forensic experts that's so important for Mexico and for the entire region has to be strengthened and sustained to be able to do its job right. And the second comment I want to make has to do with impunity. Investigating and punishing those who are responsible for all this, because getting away with it, this leads to further disappearances. There's obviously judicial responsibility here. I know in Mexico there's discussion about judicial reform, and I hail the fact that this is being discussed, and there has to be a debate on judicial reform. Impunity in the face of such acts that are taking place. This must be part of the discussion. I would ask our report, it would be useful for our report if you could provide us in writing the general guidelines and what the prosecutor's office can tell us what measures had been taken to ensure these proper investigation for these murders of these women searchers. What are the concrete measures that have been taken? And all of for the actual perpetrators and the masterminds behind all of these crimes. What is being done to find them and punish them? What has been done to get to the bottom of the judicial responsibility of justice operators for ensuring this impunity? To getting to the bottom of judicial officials, the UN has made specific recommendations. How many of these recommendations made by the UN system have been heeded is what I'd want to know. And next, in the Inter-American Commission, we want to say, we feel for you, but in your struggle and in your pain, we admire that you sally forth and you continued. Not only are you looking for your loved ones, but you're also seeking to improve the human rights institutional framework. And this is quite an incentive. And now I'm going to give the floor to my colleague from the Secretariat. Thank you very much, Madam Chair, here at the head table, chairing this hearing. To search should not, it should not cost your life. And that's what we want to say here at this hearing. On behalf of the Executive Secretariat, I want to express my admiration and support and solidarity to these women searchers, and particularly the women who, with such fortitude, have moved these efforts forward, not only in Mexico, but have brought this to international bodies as well, so that we're able to do our job. And I'd like to take advantage of this opportunity to thank the state for providing all the information, specifically with regard to the measures that it has been taking and in the different bodies that it's creative and with regard to coordination, so that we can structure this effort and can be useful together with the information from the civil society. And it's a primary source for the report that's being drafted by the Commission on Forced Disappearance in Mexico that will come out this year. I have 3 specific questions, Madam Chair, that have to do with the scope, the development, and the results of the census of disappeared person, the registry. Specifically, what I would like to know with regard to result, in view of the fact that the registry last year in the report, Commission's report, note was taken of more than 100,000 disappeared individuals in the National Registry as a result of a census that was conducted. What I'd like to know is, it's so painful to talk about numbers of people when we're talking about human beings, not numbers. And we don't know what their fate has been, but on the registry, identification of the individuals by name. And we must understand, what is the goal of this census? Was it achieved? And what is the scope of this census that was conducted? And how is it going to be used with regard to putting together public policies? So these are questions aimed at to the state. And with regard to civil society, how was it viewed by civil society? The mothers, searchers, the conducting of the census. How did you view it? What do you think the commission should do in examining, and what conditions should be put in place with regard to these measures and the institutional human rights protection framework in Mexico currently? Those are the questions I'd like to ask. Thank you very much. And I would like to ask the rapporteur, the special rapporteur, if he has any questions. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I would like to thank the family members of the victims and the victims themselves of this situation that has been brought before the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights. I'd like to greet the distinguished representatives of the state of Mexico. And I would like to express my sympathy for and support for everything you're doing in this struggle. And you're unwavering, tireless to bring about justice for your loved ones. But not only that, but you're aimed at serve the interests of the greater good of society as well. I would like to thank you for your courage in so clearly laying out the difficulties that you face. I also would like to express my gratitude to the representative of the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights for being so clear and for deeply recognizing the efforts that you have made. This is quite consequential. He's on the ground. He's seen it with his own eyes. It's very important to understand that you're an engine of change. Even though forced disappearance, it's aimed at obliterating the rights of the person who's affected. But society as a whole also is affected by these perpetrators. And so therefore, you are living proof that you can achieve this second, you can prevent it from silencing everybody, because your organization counters that goal of these people, these criminals. You're capable of organizing and confronting these forced disappearances in a proactive way and seeking institutional mechanisms, public policies, as has been explicitly set forth by the state. Your protection, therefore, must be of the highest priority. One question that I would like to pose to you, the petitioners, and two opportunities you actually touched upon this, that you haven't been recognized as human rights defenders. You haven't been placed in the category of human rights defenders to be afforded greater protection. And so I did not hear any response to that from the state, to that question that I posed. I can't quite understand what are the stumbling blocks preventing you from being recognized as human rights defenders. If you're not human rights defender, then who is? The human rights protection movement is on behalf of victims, whether it's communities or family members. Human rights defenders are human rights defenders, whoever they are. Whether it's an NGO, it is a human rights defender also. Wherever they are in the capital, whether they're in London, Washington, wherever they're located. But the engine behind the powerhouse, they're the victims, families, the victims themselves. And so in my rapporteurship, I'm always dealing with people who mobilize, and that's who you are, and that's why I want to know what stands in the way of recognizing you all as human rights defenders. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Okay, now I'd like to give 8 minutes to the representatives of the petitioners and 8 minutes to the representatives of the state.
Thank you very much indeed. Let me begin by responding to this state. Why are we here, they asked. The answer is simple. We are here because you all barred the doors and we couldn't reach you. That's why we're here. Now, as to this ongoing search for our beloved persons and the census that has been generated to keep track of our efforts, we have done that because we want there to be an evidence of the number of people that have gone missing. And according to the state, there is no need for it. Well, this is absurd. We know that the whole matter in our country, as it were, falls into a clandestine dead end, or, might I say so, grave. Now, I'm not saying that something similar doesn't exist, but it is clear that whatever the state is doing is not enough. People disappear every day in our country, and the so-called roundtables for peace, yes, they exist, but they're not efficient. And why have we sitting here at this table and people like us, what's wrong with your recognizing who we are and what we are doing? The searches that are going on in Mexico are very, very different. Let me tell you something. It isn't the same to look for someone in Sinaloa or in Veracruz or in Coahuila. The country is very different overall, the very vast extent of the nation. And I believe that, quite frankly, you should be embarrassed to speak of protection and to presuppose that there is such a thing. Every day the statistics prove that whatever is being done is insufficient, alas. We're talking about 115,000 people gone missing and maybe 40 sentences that have been handed down. How do you square one with the other? Thank you very much, says the next member of the Representative of Families. Thank you to the Commission for your kind words. We come here armed with trust and faith in this commission. We know that you can visit the state of Mexico. We know that you can walk with the government and demand protection measures. The words extended by Commissioner Pochak, chair of this session, are most welcome. We, too, ask that the requested precautionary measures that have come to you in our individual petitions be held up, and that, and not held up, but rather put in force and strengthen what we're doing. We need to have the requisite representation at our hearings. Titulars of different heads of different units, I will tell you, just are not giving this matter the priority that it requires. There have been 15 murders of people who have searched for those who have already been murdered. What has been done with those cases? Not a thing. Ignored. We've talked with family members. We've talked with groups of people that are working. But we can only hope that more and more individuals will join us. And we need to make sure that people hear about these circumstances. The consequences of disappearance are serious. Forced displacement and a number of other choices that have to be made in one's life, and the ongoing uphill battle that it is to keep looking hope against hope for the people you love and who are missing, especially when one is doing it independently. The state talks a good game. People who are defending human rights and different searches, but none of those mechanisms are guaranteeing or even trying to guarantee or to uphold the safety of those of us who are family members who are out there looking. Thank you very much, says the next speaker. We do thank you for this commission, and thank you for recognizing each one of us, bereaved family members who are determined to keep looking. The images of the persons that have been identified as assassinated when they were looking for their members is only a partial information that is being held. This is only part of the work that the family members in question have carried out in their desperate attempt to find their loved ones, even at the cost of their own lives. This should be an obligation of the state to find out how these people died. This cannot go unnoticed. And that leads me to the very point. The state of Mexico has not recognized that the searchers, we sitting here, are also human rights defenders. Who the heck are we if we are not human rights defenders? And we, by that very virtue, should be included in the mechanism. So when the state talks such a good game and talks about the measures that have been taken, you are holding yourselves out as human rights defenders. Well, bully for you. We're glad that you are human rights defenders. At least you have the defense of the state. Who do you think we are? We are human rights defenders too, but we're doing it with no defense from the secretary. And the state has yet to tell us, by the way, how many of those searchers have such protection. Commissioner Demes has asked what the participation of the victims has been in the working groups that have spoken. Some of them have included our participation. At one of the next hearings, you will see a couple of those who are part of the consultative mechanism. There is a national committee on searchers and participation of some of the victims. But on the whole, when the state speaks of the tables, of the peace tables and other mechanisms, it's just not enough. Just not enough. It's as if the penny hasn't dropped. These are people who are desperate and who have taken matters into their own hands and searches into their own hands, not because they feel that everything necessary is being done, but precisely because they feel everything has not been done. And even at the cost of risk to themselves, they are determined to go forward. We so desperately hope that Commissioner Patrick might come to Mexico, because we would love for you to see for yourself the situation of the searchers. It would be great if you could sometime come on one of those searches. The Committee on Forced Disappearances has done just that. Come and see for yourself. Thank you for that comment. Thank you, and I'm pleased to give the floor to the State of Mexico. Distinguished Ambassador for Mexico, I'd like to have my colleagues from the capital up on the screen. I'm Chadik Pliego Granillo. I'm the Director General of Public Policy and Public Outreach of the Search Committee. A number of the mechanisms that we're using from the National Committee for Searches have given good fruit, good results. We're looking to try to strengthen our interinstitutional efforts where searches are concerned. The interpreter regrets the sound is really poor. There's an echo, and it's very, very hard to interpret in these circumstances. Doing the best I can. We work with local prosecutors and associations. We have permanently invited representatives of the International Collaboration Fund for Missing People and UNHCR, that is the United Nations Human Rights Commission, represented in Mexico, and other elements of the United Nations which have been walking with us and supporting us in the framing of a number of the public policies that we have mentioned here. There is also a group of members of the citizenry, men and women, who are searchers, who have not given up because they understand that the National Citizens Commission for Searching is the outreach of the families of those who have gone missing. The law establishes the validity of these groups, and they are recognized to be important entities, and track how the state of Mexico has sought, through this National Citizenry Council, has sought to move the ball forward, as it were. We work with the family, and at this last meeting of the citizens group, and in previous meetings, I would add, we have included the members of the civil service who have been involved in the National Search Committee, who have worked hand in hand with the searchers, the family searchers, the individual searchers throughout the country. The states have sought to recognize them officially and certify them as such. This is a means by which what the National Search Committee is carrying out seeks to guarantee the fact that the mothers and fathers, the next of kin, the brothers and sisters, all of the relatives of those who have gone missing are not alone. The state must recognize, and indeed is poised to officially recognize, that the search for the missing is our number one responsibility, but is the absolute right of the family members. Nobody can doubt that. You're in no way overstepping the bounds. You're doing what everyone recognizes you must do, and we must recognize you must do. That is the position of the state of Mexico at this point, but please know we would be very willing to send you additional information and honor your own efforts. Thank you. Thank you. I'm Norma Herrera, working for human rights from the Ministry of the Interior. With regard to integral reparation of the victims, there are local commissions with whom we work throughout the Federation. What we seek to do is to guarantee, promote, and protect the rights of the victims, and most especially as regards their rights to assistance, justice, reparation, and due diligence, thereby walking hand in hand with those directly affected so that they can hope to go back to life as normal. We have stated publicly that the victims are at the very heart of our efforts on the basis of equality and equity, understanding that the victims in their own territories, victims of these atrocities, have every right to be recognized and assisted. The present government has strengthened our international capacity so to do, and in that effort seeks to make more visible how important these efforts are. As to the training of those who can benefit from psychological support, we, back in November of 2022, launched a set of courses. 40-some women and 22 men attended. Many others, 21%, came from administrative offices. But training involved psychological assistance, social impact, basic psychosocial backstopping. When a defender of human rights or a news journalist is the target of threat, we can include that person in our efforts. Once a request is received, we can activate measures in order to make sure that person is not lost, is not forgotten, and is indeed helped. Of course, each case has its own merits, and anybody is free to speak up. The people who are looking are welcome, journalists as well. This is open to everyone. Thank you. Time marches on. I'm afraid we have to wrap this up. I'm so sorry. But let me simply say that the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights will certainly be following this very, very assiduously. And we look forward to working with the state. And you may be sure that the representation here can count on us. By the way, that dialogue can continue in Mexico and perhaps should do. You don't have to come to Washington to do that. It's indeed important that this continue in Mexico. We are drawing up a report, as I said, and in March, we hope to have a questionnaire drawn up on which basis we can write a thematic report and a set of questions so that the Executive Secretariat can distribute it. And we would like to get all of the answers from the judiciary. Don't forget the judiciary, and we'll also put this up on the web so that civil society can participate fully. I hereby close this hearing, and I wish you all a very good day.